Hi, Molly. Molly, are you there? You're on mute if you're talking. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Christy.
Hi. Hi.
Howdy.
All right. Molly, I just wanted to see if there's anything you need before we let people in. I hope your audio is working here. Hi. Hi.
Hi, how
So
are
nice. So nice to see you.
you? You too. What's going on? Do you have a good weekend?
Yeah. Yeah, it was fine. I presume you have slides or something. Are you presenting for OYA?
I'm not. Our CFO is going to present, and I'm here for questions and other. And I don't think I don't know if she's going to present slides. She was on or off about slides, so she might just want to do it more like a conversation since we haven't presented um, we haven't kind of finalized our proposed budget yet. And it's Stacy Chase, and she's in the waiting room, I think.
Oh, I see her. Okay, great. All right. Well, we can let people in.
We haven't quite finalized our budget, so we can't be sharing out stuff that we're still,
Yeah.
you know, figuring out.
Yeah. Child welfare and ODDS have the same
Yeah.
situation. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning. All right. Dan, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Welcome, everybody, to the July Investments and Finance Committee meeting. Thank you so much for making time in your day to join us. We're going to start out as we typically do with our group agreements. We ask everybody to be present here now at the best of your ability. We know there's lots of other distractions that are tempting. Let's treat everybody with respect. Let people finish their thoughts. Let's use the chat if we hear people using acronyms to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. Let's keep focused on ideas and invite disagreement without being disagreeable. If you're quieter, feel free to lean in. If you tend to be more active, feel free to lean back. We're focused on the system here rather than individual situations, but you've got great resources in the room, and any of us who, with appropriate expertise, is happy to help you offline with an individual situation. Stay focused on our system, our purpose of improving our system of care. Be mindful that some of us wield a lot bigger sticks than others and have more access to the levers of power. And let's be open to repairing harm if we unintentionally hurt somebody else in the room. All right, we'll run through our roll call. Dan Toma is here. Allison Stark is excused. She's away with family. Courtney Esparza and Andrew Grover.
Present.
Adam Rodkowski, Christina Matusek is also excused today.
And Adam is present.
Molly Taylor, Amy Munoz.
Amy's here.
Jennifer Schwartz, Karsten Peterson.
Jennifer is here.
Forgive if I get the last name wrong. You can please correct us so we all know. Gio Delanis.
I think Gio just came in. Gio, welcome. We're just doing some quick introductions. Sorry to put you on the spot the minute you jumped in.
Hi. Yeah, it's just pronounced Dianas.
Dianas, thank you.
Yep.
West Rivers, Jill Archer.
Jill's here.
Alex Medina, Annabelle. She told me last time, I think Italic.
Adelaide.
Okay, we'll see how many times I get that wrong.
Hey, no problem. Alex and Annabelle may not be here, but this is Drew Cohen, and I work with both of them and can relay any information needed to either of them.
Thank you, Drew.
Yep.
Molly Rogers, Soren Metzger.
Soren Metzger is here.
Amy Walsh and Ben Hoffman let us know you wouldn't be able to be here.
This is Amy Walsh. I'm here.
Awesome, thank you. And Paul Sell. All righty, and Christy, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we sure do.
Yay for the win. All right, today on our agenda, we are fortunate to have representatives from Oregon Youth Authority with us to discuss their budget, as well as the county juvenile justice budget. And Oregon Youth Authority. Oh, wait, before we dive into that, apologies. We have time for public comment. So I'm going to open the floor for any public comment. Hearing none. Let's go ahead with the Oregon Youth Authority budget.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'll introduce myself, but I'm going to quickly hand it over to Stacy and allow her to introduce herself because she's really the star of the OIA budget show today. I think most of you know who I am, but if you don't, I'm Sandra Santos. Use she, her, ella pronouns. I am the Assistant Director of Community Services at the Oregon Youth Authority. So I have the pleasure of overseeing our parole and across the state, as well as our community resource unit, which manages all of our contracts with all of our community residential and non-residential programs for our youth. I also oversee foster care. We have a foster care program solely for the Oregon Youth Authority, and as well as our victim engagement program and a few other little things over there. All things community is me. I also am a voting member on the council and very much enjoy my participation on that at that meeting. And I'm going to pass it to Stacy Chase, who is our CFO and helping guide us through our current budget build that we're doing right now, and let her introduce herself and talk to you a little bit about what we're thinking for our budget.
Thank you, Sandra. Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Splendid. As Sandra said, my name is Stacy Chase. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Oregon Youth Authority, and I'm here today to provide an overview of the 27-29 draft community service budget. I want to emphasize the draft component as we are still building out the agency request budget. So while I don't expect significant changes, I just want to flag that there could be changes. So just to give a recap of the 27-29 budget development for executive branch agencies, as you may have heard from other presentations, the revenue situation in the state is expected to be constrained. Therefore, agencies were asked to develop budgets, assuming there would be no additional general fund or lottery fund revenue available. Therefore, we could not request for expansion of programs, nor could we request to propose new programs. Additionally, agency budget development was expected to follow priorities of the governor's priorities of focusing on affordability, economic prosperity, and protecting Oregon's values. With that, we were approved to incorporate 7 policy option packages into the agency's budget. They were administrative in nature and did not result in any changes to programs. So what I mean by that is we have a policy package that is a net revenue neutral, which means it does not require any additional revenue or from general fund or lottery funds, and it was to align position reclasses agency-wide. Additionally, we requested bond funding for some capital improvements and some ongoing IT projects. With respects to the draft 27-29 community services budget, the total funds budget is estimated at $191.1 million. Again, that's total funds, $143 million of which is general fund.
I'm just going to interject, Stacy, that so you're sharing community services specific, not Oregon Youth Authority.
Correct.
Okay, so I do think that they want to hear the whole agency wide, and not just community services. I could be wrong on that, and
unfortunately, I'm not in a place to share the agency-wide budget at this time because it is still in draft form. So there's still some entries that have not been made. Therefore, I don't have aggregated data. So would you not like me to continue?
I think there'd be interest in hearing specifically, and I'm not sure that everyone here in this meeting kind of understands the different departments and our scope of work. But if that's all we have, sorry, I wasn't aware that that was just going to be the one piece. But Christy, you probably would better be able to speak. So what Stacy would share is just about my budget for the department that I run. Of course, we have several departments, the largest one being facility services, which covers our 9 closed custody facilities. And then we have business services and development services and our health services. So all distinct with distinct budgets and different funding sources and all of that. But maybe it's a good place to start with community services. And then if there's another opportunity, we could share out at a different time.
Chrissy, I'll let you share your thoughts, but I would say yes, and if you can put for us the community services sort of in perspective, like what portion of the total Oregon Youth Authority pie is that, and also if you're able to speak sort of more in generalities about the larger budget and priorities, understanding that you're not able to share specifics.
Okay. So the community services budget represents approximately 31% of Oregon Youth Authority's total fund budget. And so total funds being general funds, other funds, including debt service and federal funds. So as I mentioned, the policy options agency-wide that were approved by the governor's office and DAS CFO to be incorporated into the agency's ARB were those that were either net neutral, such as the position reclass POP that I mentioned, and those that were bond funded. So, so specifically capital improvements, there's some electronic security components, a bond funded security or survey rather for a new high school at the McLaren facility, and then ongoing maintenance for the JGIS legacy system, which is anticipated to continue for at least 3 to 5 years while the modernization project for JGIS is ongoing. And then, thank you, Christy. And then ongoing IT projects that are priorities for the agency that will be in part bond funded, as well as a payroll services transition from OYA to the Department of Administrative Services. This biennium in April of this year, actually, the OYA payroll services team was transferred over to the DAS shared payroll team. So again, this POP is just a housekeeping item. So with that, I mean, there's no significant changes to the ARB other than those 7 policy option packages for agency-wide. For current service level, we followed the state agency budget development criteria for standard inflation, statewide inflation, and received some exceptions specifically related to 24-hour operations, for example, increasing our food costs, equivalent to costs that were increased at Department of Corrections for in-house folks. So moving on to, are there other questions that you'd like me to cover with the agency budget? Sorry, timing is just not ideal. Okay, then I will move on with the community services portion. So as I mentioned, the community services draft ARB budget is 191.1 million total funds, and 73.5% of those total funds are distributed directly to the community. That includes distributions to counties, distributions for foster care beds, BRS and residential beds, grants for residential partners, and then other individualized services. The budget assumes approximately 83 foster care beds, and based on the current distribution of residential beds in the community, it supports approximately 219 BRS and residential beds. And then for individualized services, there's 6.5 million set aside for individualized services, which beds only account for 1/3 of that budget. So it's approximately 11 beds. The rest would be distributed based on actual services. Let me see. There was a request to talk about budget reductions. And just to recap, every agency is required to incorporate 10% budget reduction options for legislative consideration as part of our agency request budget. And at this time, we are unable to disclose what those are. We are still working through as an executive team what options to consider, but we are looking at priorities based on safe, secure, and predictable operations. Accountability through what we call impact, which is insight, measurement, performance, accountability, continuous improvement, and transparency. We're also prioritizing based on behavioral health strategy and strong business fundamentals. So as we're considering what options will be incorporated on the final budget reduction option list, we are leaning back onto those priorities to see how do each of the options allow us or affect us in our ability to achieve those priorities. So with that, what questions do you have for me?
I can speak more. The majority of our dollars go directly to services for youth. So the big, I mean, I don't know. I'm not really good with budget language like Stacy is. She's super fancy and official with all of her budget language. But what I can speak to is I know my budget very well in and out, and the majority of our dollars go towards direct services to youth. So either to residential programming, non-residential mentoring, credible messengers, direct needs for youth. We support our county partners with IS dollars. We, and then staff and foster homes. A number of our dollars go towards foster homes. Yeah, and our grant dollars are actually specifically for any entity, individual, agency that is going to contract with us, either wants to, is building a contract with us, or is currently contracting with us to provide services directly to you. So can be residential. Most of them are residential, but also don't have to be residential. Could be community-based services, providing services directly to you. Trying to think of other areas. Any questions about that? Okay.
Well, I'll just dive in a little bit provocatively and not really knowing that much about what I'm talking about, but and I don't know how much you're able to address this indirectly because I'm getting at priorities, I guess, but it's never easy to cut 10% of one's budget. And typically it seems like the options involve a thinner soup or soup to less people. And can you talk at all about like how you're thinking about those trade-offs?
So thank you for the question. As we've been discussing our budget reduction options, I want to emphasize that we are not looking back to what proposals have been made previously. We have started off with where are areas that, hold on, I'm trying to think of how to say this. So please bear with me. As you mentioned, any budgetary cuts at this point are difficult, right? We did talk about what the impact would be as if we just continue to reduce a bunch of services, as you indicated, thin the soup. And that wasn't the approach that we wanted to take. We wanted, again, to focus on those priorities, but then also consider in the event that those reductions were taken, do we still have the structure that remains to provide the services in the ability that we need them to be effective? So that doesn't exactly answer your question, and I know that, but we were intentionally not looking to just thin the soup and, if I may use the expression, do a lot of things not very well. That was not the plan. We really want to be very strategic and intentional about what options would be presented and what the downstream effect to the juvenile system would be. So that's partly why I would say that it's taking additional time to go through and prioritize, with the understanding that knowing what our economy is, it's likely that these options may be taken, at least some, hopefully not all. But so we're trying to be very intentional, strategic, and thoughtful about what is put out there.
I'll kind of add to that. The reason why Stacy's being so careful with her words is that even proposing cuts that we do not necessarily believe are 100% gonna happen can impact, of course, our cuts we don't have areas that to cut that aren't going to impact our employees. And so, and even with the thought or idea that an employee might lose their job could send them looking for another job right away. And the way our staffing patterns are, we have 24/7 facilities. We have, our situation is such that we can't, we just don't want to do that to our staff. We can't do that to our services. So we can't be putting out there what we might or might not do until we're absolutely certain and until staff are notified ahead of time. In addition to that, I think what Stacey's trying to say is there's no, we can't propose cuts to all areas without really considering if we cut to one area. The two big sides of our agency are our close custody facilities and our community-based services. So we can't consider cutting one side and not understand that there's going to have an impact on the other side. So if we had to, for some reason, close something in close custody, that we don't get less youth all of a sudden. They just go someplace else. And so we couldn't also cut in another place and think that the youth are going to receive the services that they need intentionally that way. So we have to be kind of thoughtful that understanding that there's a possibility that whatever we propose very well could happen. Whereas I think historically we've been in a bit of a mindset that it's just an exercise and that there isn't probably going to be any serious cuts to what we propose. So it's kind of a delicate dance. And Adam, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. I guess, in Senate Bill 1, when this council was created in legislation, right, we are a central impartial forum for statewide policy development, funding, strategy, recommendations, and planning. And it's tough to talk about funding strategy recommendations when we don't have clarity on the budgets from the agencies. And so I guess I'm expressing maybe just a generalized concern is that if we're tasked with making recommendations, but the planning and recommendations are already baked before we ever take a look at it, I don't have a ton of, I guess I'm expressing that as a concern. And then maybe my question is, are the folks like you, Stacey, on the OIA side talking to your counterparts at ODHS about the child welfare budget and how there's downstream impacts and cumulative impact based on what OIA is recommending as a budget cut and how that then impacts DHS's recommendations and OHA's recommendations, et cetera. Are there any cross-agency discussions about that occurring as you build these cuts?
Again, as Sandra mentioned, that's a difficult dance as well, because as soon as we share information outside of our agency without properly discussing the impacts to internal staff, we have a chance of messaging not being controlled, if you will. So we are considering the impacts to other state agencies, but we cannot reach out to them and talk about the specific downstream effects, number one, until we have final decisions made, but number two, without at least having some form of communication plan to how we're going to contain those conversations. I also want to, I'm not sure what year the SOCAC was established. In the last few budget cycles, the process for agencies establishing their requested budget has differed than previously, in that there has been a more consolidated, collaborative executive branch process for agencies putting forward their requests. Whereas previously, agencies would talk to all of their partners and say, hey, what would you like us to include in our budget? And especially for this biennium, when we don't have, or rather the 27-29 budget build, when we don't have the opportunity to request general funds or lottery funds, it's more of a general conversation of what would you like us to consider with the resources that we currently have.
Thanks, Stacy. I know this is seems like a super uncomfortable conversation to have, and I know that your hands are tied in a number of places in terms of what you can say, and so I appreciate you doing your best to be as transparent as you can, understanding the constraints you're working under. A couple things, and I raised my hand and called on myself without explicitly calling on myself. One, it's shocking to me to hear that agencies are not talking to each other in developing the recommendations. And again, I hope you know this is not a criticism of you, but just as you said that, like, or as Sandra said, you know, a cut to the closed facilities is going to have an impact on your community services. Cuts in one agency are going to have an impact on another agency, and to be trying to develop budgets without being aware of what might be coming at you from other parts of the government is shocking to me. In, you know, the concern that Adam brought up about, you know, we're legislatively mandated to provide input into agency budgets and so forth, and all of the agencies have given us a version of what you said. Is like, yeah, well, we really can't share any detail while this is in development. And in particularly, I respect that, you know, this is an open public meeting. It's, you know, this is going to be posted on YouTube or wherever it is we post this. You cannot say anything here that you don't want getting out to the whole world. And it seems to me that SOCAC going forward, and Anna and Christy have been working on this a little bit. And Anna's going to come talk to us about, like, what she's been able to see and input she's been able to give. But it's, you know, I wonder about in the future, if you don't have a quorum present, then it's not subject to open public meetings law. So could there be a representative possibly of SOCAC in some of those conversations as these recommendations are being developed? A representative that can bring SOCAC's feedback to that process in confidence, knowing that that's information that can't be shared back publicly.
Well, I certainly can do that, Dan. I am a member of SOCAC and and Carrie, I think I'm part of, you know, the larger system and bring that to the table at our executive team and while we're building our budget. And I was going to ask you, well, how are the other state agencies? How has this gone with the other state agencies? Because none of us have finalized our budgets yet. So I was curious if someone else had laid this out in a way that makes more sense, because to Adam's point of, well, we're supposed to be giving you feedback, but we can't. So this is, I've been now on SOCAC for 4 years and been through a few budget cycles, and this is the first time that I've been invited to share our budget building. And so I think maybe there is probably a way to do this to get input without sharing out. And maybe even if it is just you all sharing your input and thoughts that we can take to the table, I think there's great value in that. And to say that we don't collaborate or think about, we certainly do with agencies, and OYA compared to ODHS and OHA, we are, our budget is much smaller, and any cuts to our dollars are directly staff and direct services to youth pretty much. So we're not a huge player in the youth serving state agencies, but so we have to be very, very thoughtful about how we go about this. And I think that there's probably some better ways that we can get input.
Thank you, Sandra, for that reminder that you're there at the table and you are representing SOCAC, at least with one of your hats as you do that. And, all of the agencies have representatives on SOCAC. So I think that's a great way to think about at least one of the avenues for us to provide that input.
If I may chime in, also I think there's opportunities to provide feedback that are not so specific to the numbers that are incorporated in the budget. And what I mean by that is, in a time like this, agencies are building budgets primarily based on current service level. And so I would encourage the committee to consider how our service is being delivered today. Are services being delivered in a way that aligns with the priorities that you would expect for Oregon Youth Authority? And if they're not, then that's an opportunity for you to say, hey, we would actually like to see more over here than more over here as it relates to community services. And so, and then Sandra and I can work internally to say, well, what would that look like? For example, if you were to say, we'd like to see more beds over here in this environment, that would mean less beds over here. And is that a direction that you'd like to take? And if so, okay, we can discuss that. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be, to the line item detail level. It can be more conceptually of what is important based on the services that are currently being delivered, because we're not adding any new programs. And as we're discussing potential reductions, what reductions in the program do you not want us to even consider? So that's the feedback that I think would be extremely timely right now and would be very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. I'm mindful of time and that we have juvenile justice coming up. Any very brief additional thoughts or questions for Sandra or Stacy, or from Sandra or Stacy?
Yeah, Stacy, I just, in terms of like your like providing feedback to you, like what is the mechanism? Should we follow up offline and you can send some, like, how do we operationalize that?
I think if collectively you want to provide feedback via email to Sandra and I, and then we can talk internally, whether that's the priorities that the committee has. And keeping in mind that, time is of the essence. So as quickly as you can email those items to us would be fantastic, so that we can consider them, discuss them, and incorporate it as possible.
Okay, I have some follow-up questions, but I'll just follow up with you by email.
All right. Thanks again, Stacy and Sandra, for facing the fire here. Molly, are you ready to take us on our next journey here?
I think so. So I think I can share. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Has everybody seen my slideshow? Okay. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Molly, and I am with the Wasco County Department of Youth Services, and have been in juvenile justice in the state of Oregon for the last 31 years, always at the county level. And so I'm going to take you on a different journey today. When we talk about state agencies, we're talking about one agency and with one set of priorities and one set of kind of marching orders, right? A reduction, no pops, no anything. I'm going to take you on a journey of 36 different divisions that have different rules all across the state of Oregon. Let's see if it will let me.
All right, it looks like Molly has frozen. Hopefully she'll be rejoining us here in just a moment.
Am I back?
You're
Yeah.
back.
I went away. I may not be able to share. Let me see if I can try it a different way.
You could also email me the slides, Molly. I'm happy to.
I will email them to you really quick, Christy, because that may work better. So while I'm doing that, I can continue on the conversation. Okay, I have multiple things going different directions. Here I thought I was going to be so technologically ready. Christy.
Zoom always has surprises in store for us.
I know it does. And I really did think, I was like, oh, I'm on board. I got this. Not a problem today whatsoever. Okay, I sent it. So OJDDA is an organization made up of all of the different juvenile directors across the state of Oregon. So there's 36 of us total. Our vision is really to really talk about promoting public safety, reduction of juvenile crime, evidence-based practices, and leadership, and really talking about a fair and equitable juvenile justice system. We're mandated in the statute, and we're a county responsibility. And Oregon runs a bifurcated system. So you heard about the Oregon Youth Authority. There's two sides to the Oregon juvenile justice system. There's the county side and there's the state side. And so anything that is impacted at OIA doesn't just impact the state agencies such as Oregon Department of Human Services, Oregon Health Authority, Department of Corrections. It also directly impacts the 36 counties and the upstream. So we heard about downstream. The juvenile justice system and the county system is really the upstream portion of the juvenile justice system. So we are a bifurcated system in the state of Oregon, which also means that 90% of the youth that are served in the juvenile justice system are actually served at the county level. So we're on slide 3, I think, Christy. And so only 5% of the youth involved in the system go to the, actually about 7% of the youth go to the Oregon Youth Authority, and less than 5% of the youth actually then go into closed custody. Funding of local agencies, so the next slide on slide 4, is across the state, we're primarily all county general fund. I'm not seeing them change either. It might be something on how I developed them. So county general funds are based off of property tax. That's how we're funded in the counties, is we're off of the property tax rate. And that really impacts us because the property taxes were frozen through Measure 5 in 1991 and then Measure 57. And so the funding for juvenile departments across the state of Oregon varies vastly. Perfect, right there. Some counties have levies to help, law enforcement levies or public safety levies. So for example, Hood River County or Linn County, they both, Lane County, they have some additional levies that way. But counties do not receive state general fund other than through grants or basic services. And so I'll talk about those in a second. There's a few counties that receive some federal matching dollars through an agreement with Oregon Youth Authority helps access those, Title IV dollars, but those are for residential placements or specific things. The counties do receive some funding through the Oregon Youth Authority. These are diversion, and that agreement goes back to the 1980s when a specific law disallowed placing youth in correction or in county jails, lockups, and then basic services. And these were negotiated and passed in about 1999. And they were specifically to acknowledge that there was pressure being put on counties to not send as many youth to the youth correctional facilities. So they allow for things as supervision, shelter, detention, and then individualized services. And you heard Stacy talk about those, that they're most often used for beds or for youth-specific services in partnership with the counties and the Oregon Youth Authority in what's called a co-management agreement. Also back in the late 1990s, 1999, there was something called the Juvenile Crime Prevention. There's three legs to a stool. It's diversion, basic, and the Juvenile Crime Prevention through Youth Development Council. Back then it was actually under Criminal Justice Commission. It wasn't part of Youth Development Council, came later. And it really was identified to fund the front end. So kids who were at risk of entering the juvenile justice system, some dollars, however, those have been significantly cut over the past 30 years, significantly cut. 60% cut for my county and Wasco County since the initial time. And then grant fundings. So some counties have been successful in applying for federal grants. And then OJJDP has some small grants for the state. So this is what the next slide, this is what the county juvenile department budgets look like. 70% comes from county general fund, so property taxes, 16% from those local levies, 8% from state support, and then 6% from things like OJDDP. Next slide. This slide is the services in the state of Oregon for our kids. This is 2003. This was a preparation for a budget reduction or a budget presentation in 2003. 99,457 unique referrals. Unique youth was 7,138. And you can see that we serve them at the community level with all sorts of services. And then the more intense youth that we are not able to serve, then go through the tunnel, through the funnel, and end up either with Oregon Youth Authority through probation or through the youth correctional facilities. So next slide. 1995 is when OYA was created. And back then, there were a lot of things created. There were youth correctional facilities, camps, and academies. The academy model was never developed in the state of Oregon. And then in 1999, the state collapsed the pass-through funds into the juvenile crime prevention. I've already covered that. So we can go to the next slide. In the last 20 years, again, we've increased, decreased, up and down. So we can go to the next one. Close custody. So one of the commitments that the counties did with our funding and how we participate with the state is a commitment to the most expensive resource is close custody. And so over the past 10 years to 2025, the counties have maintained and continue to reduce our commitment to close custody. And so this is just an acknowledgement. So every week we receive information from the Oregon Youth Authority on the number of youth who are placed in close custody. And this is accumulation of that data that they give us. And we just continue to really try to work with youth back home in their communities, not relying on the more expensive, more acute care. It's necessary. There'll always be a need, but oftentimes it's been said in many, many venues that Oregon has the highest commitment rate of any state in the United States for kids committed to correctional facilities. And so the county's just doing our part to try to reduce and share those, to reduce those numbers. Next slide. So again, we supervise youth on diversion, formal probation, and in some cases we co-manage youth on post-correctional institutions. Some of our counties are very rural, and the Oregon Youth Authority is not, I mean, they don't have JPPOs in every county. And so some of our rural counties partner with the Oregon Youth Authority to do some supervision of youth when they're not able to see them on a regular basis. Oregon Youth Authority, however, is our custodial agency. Again, they're the residential system and youth correctional facilities, facilities. We cannot place youth in residential placements without a custodial agency. So either Oregon Department of Human Services or Oregon Youth Authority, or a family can place them there voluntarily. But we as county juvenile departments, which I think sometimes is missed, people don't always understand that we can't do that. Families definitely understand we can't do that. That we can't place youth in those beds. Next slide. What do we do with all of at our basic level? A lot of the work is around community work service and job crews, skill development, attachment with adults, a lot of diversion, a lot of restorative justice. We do a lot with community-based panels and mediation services. That's definitely become an evidence-based program for us this last 4 years. More counties investing in mediation, programming, Girls Circle, Boys Council, ART, MST, FFT. Again, counties can't be reimbursed for many of these things. We have to do partnerships with our local mental health organizations or drug and alcohol programs that can access services through OHA or ODHS. Next slide. So what keeps kids from going into the Oregon Youth Authority? We know that youth with substance use issues and substance use go farther in our system. We know that they become more difficult to manage if they're using substances. Oregon lacks a network of adolescent SUD providers. There's been several juvenile departments, including mine, that have actively attempted and are working to become credentialed to actually be providers through OHA. It's a difficult and hard process, and it moves kids deeper into the system. Just be honest with you. If we could access SUD treatment, and if we could provide SUD treatment at the county level, we would decrease our pressure on residential. Mental health services and supports. You'll hear from many people, especially our detention and our close custody. I don't know if Sandra would, but I know at detention that we are struggling with youth with more severe mental health diagnosis because they're not able to receive the services in community. And so behaviors become difficult and public safety, and they find themselves in detention. We know that youth who are disconnected from education and pushed out of traditional educational systems and settings find themselves butting up against the juvenile justice system. Often specific services are not typically covered by Medicaid, so they move deeper into our system to get those services paid for. And then many programs such as FFT or MST are not viable options in our rural communities. So those are our priorities. Next slide. Detention, I talk a little bit about this. Thank you, Dan. I'm almost done, I promise. There's 11 detention facilities in Oregon, and they run 30-day programs, and detention is our most expensive resource, and we don't receive any state money for those. Last slide, I think. Maybe there's two. And then finally, the last part for us has been around the next slide. The Juvenile Justice Information System is really something that our counties are invested in, and we're really grateful for the partnership with the Oregon Youth Authority for that. And then finally, looking forward, again, all of the counties across the state are in different financial situations. I live in Wasco County. We are not in the same situation that many of my colleagues are. But as we look forward, we would really like to continue focusing on the partnership with OHA on the FCAA for detention and making that less cumbersome, and working on, yes, Courtney, working on the legislative committees to really clarify juvenile justice and preventing counties from unfunded mandates, and then working on with Youth Development Oregon, and then our partnership with JGIS. So I'll answer any questions at this point. That was a lot of information really fast.
Thank you, Molly.
Molly, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I guess in terms of like the intent of this committee and the complications that the majority of these county budgets come from county general fund, like what does the financial picture look like across the juvenile programs? Is there a way to see what those counties are contributing and whether we're seeing decreases? What does that picture look like?
So I don't know that you're seeing decreases. I think 70% of our budgets are still going to be at the county level, right? I do think though, I think if you see cuts at the state, I don't think you're going to see counties picking those services up, because they're stretched as well. And so, again, several counties are not in dire straits. I hear Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah are in significant challenges with their budgets. Detention is really at risk. Norcore Juvenile Detention, which is located in Wasco County, is at risk of not maintaining a detention facility. Deschutes County is on a lifeline. They did approve their budget for this upcoming year, and they have kind of a plan. But if detention doesn't come up with a different funding mechanism long term, detention facilities are going to close. It's just counties can't continue to pick up those pieces of it when there's so few youth in the programs. It's a great problem to have, right? We're not escalating kids to the most expensive resources, and we're not able to redirect those services.
Yeah, and this is where coordination of these budgets with agencies like Oregon Health Authority is so critical, because maybe this is an opportunity, as you said, to decrease kids going to detention as long as we have the appropriate resources in community. And that's where, but it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of conversation with Oregon Health Authority and coordinating and preparing for those potential cuts.
I think there's coordination. It's complicated because we're not set up as a health caring agency.
Right. But if they could expedite some of like the
credentialing,
there's certificate of approval processes that are
Yes.
slowing down, like that SET access, and
yeah, COAs would be nice to speed up.
Molly, thank you so much for sharing that, and very different perspective from the agencies. So it's great to hear, great to see things from that different lens. We are approaching the end of our meeting, and I'll make sure to get you out of here and on to lunch if that's where you're headed next in a timely way. Thanks everybody once again. Our next meeting is August 31st, 11 o'clock to noon, and there is a link in the chat for you to share your feedback about this meeting. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting adjourned. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks,
See you next month.
everyone. Thanks, everybody.
Can you leave that open just a second? I just can't get to the chat right now with the captions on until everybody stops talking.
Oh, for
Can you
sure.
enable the meeting be open for like a minute for me to access the link in the chat?
Absolutely, Molly. Yep.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks, Molly.
Molly Rogers, are you still on? Oh, maybe this is your holdover. Got stuck, I bet.